ingredients that you need to work through when you go through the cloud, right? So let me touch a little bit on the 4 core ingredients that we actually see as part of a secure cloud journey. Number 1 is there needs to be a clear understanding of shared responsibility. And what we mean by shared responsibility is the cloud service provider and our teams, we have to work very, very closely together, because if we look at the full stack of security, obviously some of the things are done by the cloud service provider for us. Some of the things we have to do, and some of the things we have to do together. And if we understand this core principle, it helps. When we started on a journey, maybe some of our stakeholders thought more like, we put it on the cloud and let's forget about it. Someone else is going to take care of it. But it's important to remember it's a shared responsibility. So that's learning number 1 that we actually got when we looked at it. Number 2 is, while initially we get a lot of feedback saying oh, we don't have control. I can't touch the server anymore. I don't know where the cabling is going. I don't know what's happening. Actually, it's quite the opposite. We see and have the ability to have a lot more real-time visibility around our security posture, around what's actually happening, around what we can actually do, how we detect, and what we see is a lot more visibility. So security in the cloud enables you to get more visibility, more real-time monitoring. Right? By now, actually, we just deployed this out with our CSPM solution. I'm able to see in real time which control is not applied, where do we have a configuration issue, all of these things. Impossible to have that in an on-prem environment. Right? And we can also get a lot better visibility in terms of using around. But in order to do this properly, and in order to do this secure, it's also important that cloud native security is very different to on-prem security. So what we also had to relook at is the whole tooling landscape, but also the frameworks. How do we actually look at security in the cloud compared to security on-prem? How do we take advantage of the opportunities to actually automate a lot more, deploy a lot more automation into this, and how do we get scalable controls? So one of the principles we applied for what we actually do in terms of cloud from the center, everything is IOC. We don't allow, we control the code. The tool we use, it's not a big secret, but the tool we're using, Terraform code, but we actually don't allow anyone to configure anything directly. Everything runs through a pre-approved Terraform code that my security team, that my cloud team has looked at. And by that, we have a lot more opportunity to overcome some of the skills gaps, particularly for our very small subsidiaries. If you have only 30 or 40 people in the whole company, it's difficult to have someone dedicated to security, dedicated to security controls. So we basically took advantage of that we can control this, and that we actually can use the code to help us to control that. On top of that, we also have the ability to automate control monitoring. We have the ability to look at a lot more other areas, and we're also able to see the way we set it up a lot more in terms of if we have a security incident, how the different things relate together, the real-time visibility, plus our ability to recover is a lot better. So thinking about cloud security different to on-prem security and take advantage of the tooling landscape that's out there. Think about how you apply your frameworks very, very differently. Gives you a great advantage. Right? Last but not least, if we look at enabling compliance, because obviously overall as a group we are regulated by the Bank of Thailand. So we're treated as a financial services group, which means all of our entities have to fully comply to the regulatory compliance, which sometimes is for a 30, 40 people company difficult, right? So we need to look at how do we look at the regulatory compliance as well. We also do have not just one regulator, but we have other regulators, like some of our subsidiaries are regulated by the SEC, right? So in order to make sure we show that we can fully and absolutely control our regulatory compliance, the cloud has enabled us to do that a lot better than we've been able to do in our environment that was on-prem. How do we do that? Also by taking advantage of automation, of basically tools that help us to monitor that, we also are much more able to communicate and show our regulators what we are doing, because a lot of the controls now have moved away from, oh, someone needs to go to this server and check this configuration, or someone needs to look into here. We have security by design, which enables also the proving to the regulator in a much better way. So overall, we are much better able to enable compliance and regulatory compliance in the group, but they are all related to each other, right? When we're talking about enabling compliance, it's very closely related to the shared responsibility, because the regulators also understand that in a shared responsibility model, for certain things we have to rely on our cloud service provider. So for instance, physical access control to the actual physical machines that hand behind. We have no control over that, but we have to make sure our cloud service provider looks at it. But overall, if you take these four things together, for us, we have a very, very clear benefit in better and easier security in the cloud and moving much more real time. Right? So these are the four things. But when we now dive a little bit more into the shared responsibility, and if you look into the different components of that. Obviously, as I mentioned a bit earlier, there's a lot that our cloud service provider has to do, and we not just have one, we work with multiple basically. And we don't really see what's happening under the hood on their side, but we have to look into what they're doing in terms of securing databases, the network, the actual way to look at it. But we work very closely with our cloud service providers. We have a clear understanding of like what they are doing. We monitor in real time, so we have also a view of like whatever is published around that. We pull all of that together into to create the visibility, what's on their side, right? And we're trying to do as much platform as a service as we can, meaning we also leverage the platform capability, which makes the shared responsibility model a little bit more difficult than if you just use infrastructure as a service, because there's many that we actually need to do together, because all of a sudden, like things like databases or other things we have to manage together, but it's important to understand that. So if you look at these two things together, right, the cloud service provider responsibility, which is typically from the bottom layer up to, depending on how we do it, the database, or in some cases even some of the software layers, and then our need to work across that with our identity management, with looking at like the operating systems, even though in a platform as a service, some of that is a shared responsibility as well. And we look into data security, encryption, and all of these components important. When we started this, right, I had a lot of questions from, for instance, our risk team is like, how do you make sure the data, because it's on a shared infrastructure, theoretically our data could sit on the same server physically with someone else, because we don't get infrastructure. How do you make sure no one can go over this, and how do you make sure you secure this, you do that? Obviously encryption is an important part, but also, which took me some time to convince everyone, is what makes us think that we can do as a big financial services group in Thailand, but on a global scale, if you look at the ability of resource, skills, and capabilities that we can deploy to secure what you see at the moment on the cloud service provider responsibility, compared to global companies like Microsoft, like AWS, like all of that, what can we actually do better than them? And I think we managed to get to the point to accept that actually relying on them is better than trying to do it ourselves, and that's mainly because of skill shortage, capacity shortages, but also just the way it's done, right? And if you look into how many times data has moved between different clients and all of that, I think there's very, very, very few instances, if you look at the real cases, where these risks that initially the reaction from traditional IT people, from traditional risk management is, no, I cannot see it, I cannot touch it, it must be not good, has actually become better. However, even if you look at the shared responsibility, there is a broader capability that you have to put on top of that. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, we had to completely redo our cybersecurity strategy, look at cybersecurity very, very different. We also have to make sure we educate everyone around the differences in security in the cloud. As I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges we had in the beginning is like, let's put it on the cloud, someone else is going to take care of that, right? There was a lot of that with our developers. People said, like, it's okay to set a GitHub repository to public access because it's easier to access it, right? It is okay to set this storage bucket to public access because it makes it easier for in my application architecture to basically share data with the customer, right? These things we have to train the people, no matter what you do on top, are very important. We need to look into like data protection and also encryption and the whole things around it, and then relook at how we do resilience and recovery. Because one of the good things is if we're working on the cloud, if we need to set something up, we can do this now with our centralized cloud platform. We actually can spin up any environment within, depending on how complex it is, between minutes and hours. Before it took days. Right? So the resilience strategy that we can apply in terms of regenerating something, enhancing something, doing something around that is completely different. So we need to think about that. But if you summarize like how we think about it in the shares responsibility, actually we do think that security is enhanced and we significantly reducing our overall cyber risk if we look at that. For us, in the end, it is a cost saving. Actually, while we have enhanced our capabilities significantly, in the end, we could get a lot more for a lot less. So I'm an advocate of saying security in the cloud is actually cheaper than the traditional security on-prem. And in our particular case, it might not work for everyone, but in our particular case, we actually got significant cost savings and cost avoidance that we worked through. And what we've also done with this now, we are much more agile, we are much faster. So for instance, with embedding the security into the cloud, if our R&D team needs to deploy something quickly to test something out, they come, they basically go to our cloud portal, they pick like whatever they need, and we provide them an environment very, very quickly that is already secured at the basics. Before it was like, okay, let's set up a server, we have to configure this, we have to configure that, someone has to set up this. So we get a lot more agility and innovation, not just for R&D, but also overall in our business. So that's why we do think that the security on the cloud is actually much better if you do it right. When we now look into like what is an approach that is different when we talk about security on the cloud versus the traditional security. For us, we actually start with thinking about being breached and how could we be breached from the beginning. And our strategy actually starts like what are the components basically that we need to think about, right? We shifted a lot of our security work towards the left. So we're embedding like already into the pipelining. We can control better what actually comes along. We have the opportunity to work through that a lot better. We also, and it's an important point, and I think you see the human factor on almost all of these as a bullet. We also had to train our people, and we can see it worked better. We also, with the cloud environment, it's a lot easier for us to enforce proper zero trust principles. We also able to do a lot more MFA, the monitoring basically, and from the identity side, we are a lot stronger than we've been before. Right? In the past 2 years, 2.5 years, we got to almost 100% MFA adoption by now. We basically also are able to monitor a lot more, and we're doing our training. Right? We just did a cyber drill yesterday with the whole group to work around it to bring that. In the cloud, the multi-layer protection works a little bit different, securing it. Right? So we have much clearer attack path, we have much clearer endpoints. We can basically look at like securing that a lot easier than we could do before. And at the same time, we also look at how do we secure the endpoints and work through that together. So that's the third step that we basically had to go through. And for me, the biggest one, I mean, as I mentioned, like I'm the group CTO. Security is one of the things that I'm in charge of. But the monitoring and the ability to see in real time what's actually happening has so much improved since we actually bring together the cloud components and the security components. Plus, we also deploying a lot of like outside-in security. We're working with a number of CTI vendors, ASM basically, which also helped us to have more visibility, to be earlier there. We've been able, with our cloud environment, to bring our vulnerabilities that we initially detected a lot, but we've been able in a year to bring them down by more than 90%, which obviously gives us a much stronger posture than we had before, which is also the patch cycles, all of these things are a lot slower when you're on-prem, right? And as I mentioned earlier, with the approach that we've taken, combining it with how we work with the cloud in terms of everything as code, the backup and recovery plan, and the ability to restore and recover has improved significantly. Right? Last but not least, we as SCB X are committed to our AI-first strategy, and our business is going into the direction of AI-first, and our commitment is from the business side, we will have 75% of our revenue AI-enabled, but we also take AI-powered security into the way we approach security on the cloud for us. Right? So we have already deployed a lot of AI tooling, which has helped us in number one, when we look at like our SOC, which is something that we set up for the group just last year. We are using tooling in there that has helped us significantly to filter out the noise. So we're using AI in that perspective. We're using AI for root cause analysis. So we have actually AI running across all of our incident, all of our other findings with security related. And we're using AI to summarize that for us, which also like helps a lot. So I have a report that comes up that I can click on, and it tells me, okay, here's a X number of security incidents we had. Here's the common root causes. And we use that as a strong input into how do we actually work through. A lot of this AI part is also only possible because we are on the cloud already. We have this flexibility to work through that. And we can also work through, faster adoption. Right? We are all in interesting times, right? With what's all changing. But we are much more flexible in terms of our speed. Right? So overall, what I would say, my key message is, don't think the cloud is less secure than on-prem. I am a strong believer, and we've proven it in our case, that security on the cloud can be stronger if you do it right. And if you need to do it right, you have to understand it's not your sole responsibility, and maybe the way you look at security doesn't stop at the boundaries of your enterprise. You have to look beyond, not just for your cloud service provider, but also for your SaaS solutions, for all of these components basically. But if you do that and understand that you have to do a shared responsibility, and you start to relook at your security strategy, at your framework, at your governance, at the way you work, and take advantage of everything that you can actually do in the cloud, it offers you a lot of opportunity for increased resilience, but also speed. And last but not least, in our particular case, it is a cost saving, cost avoidance for us. We build up a lot of capability at cost that would have not been possible if we would have not tied our cloud journey together with our cybersecurity journey. Right? So I leave you with my message around this. Don't think cloud is less secure. It's actually more secure and can accelerate and help you a lot. Right? I think there's 3 minutes left. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take 1 or 2 questions. Else, I would thank you. Okay, then let me thank you for spending the part of your morning here with you. I hope, question? I don't know if you...
Sorry, my voice is not that good. actually in case of incidents, right? If like earlier, like recent year, we found some incidents happen with the cloud solution. Not only the disruption, but also the breach. In that case, how, I mean, in the real life, how could we go back to the cloud solution to gain and discuss on share responsibility? What is the best way to work around with that way? Thanks.
So I think my message number one is think about the breach before the breach actually happens. So depending on what kind of cloud solution actually you have, right? And what we're talking about, whether it's a data storage or it's a SaaS solution or whatever else. But in principle, you should think about like that you, first of all, like encrypt data, right? In transit and in storage, which even if the cloud provider gets breached, the ability for someone, for an attacker to do something with your data is limited, right? So I think the prevention starts before you go there. Also very important, third-party risk management, right? This is still a big topic for us in our security team. How do we extend our security more out to the, but what we're already doing is we consistently monitor our providers, leveraging some of our CTI platforms, right? So we look at our big providers, we see if anything is happening, we look into like what's their risk score based on our CTI vendors that's actually helping us, and we're having conversations with them early rather than later, right? That's another measure of prevention, that you look into the third-party risk management, right? In terms of like when the breach really happens and the incidents happens, is my core learnings is, number one is you need to have established like clear communication protocols. You need to have basically established like clear points of context, clear escalation protocols, and also aside from the process side, build the right relationship with your vendor as well. Pick your vendors that you basically feel like you can work with them basically, and then it's about like creating the process of basically looking at what has happened, right? And for that, there's always a fine balance, because they will not share everything. But if you have a good relationship, maybe they share a little bit more that they cannot share officially with you, right? So you can look at that, and then it's about tracking what are they doing to remediate, how are they working through it. And worst case, right, we also look at some of that, saying like if this particular vendor, I mean, you're not going to do this with your primary cloud provider, but a SaaS provider that sits on the cloud, you can also look into like just like blacklisting them and removing them from service if they're not fulfilling their security measure. We haven't done that, we haven't had that issue, but I think it's like that you, if you think about breach, start thinking about it before, making sure like what can I do to secure whatever is on their side. So that's back to shared responsibility. Data layer, you should think about whatever you're sharing with them. Either you encrypt or you make sure they encrypt properly. Think about establishing the process before and be clear in terms of communication protocols, SLAs, all of that, because the last thing you want is like, oh, something is happening, let me call the help desk of that vendor to figure out what's actually happening, because then it's probably too late, right? These are my 2 cents on how you can work with that, and keep monitoring and apply proper third-party risk management, not as a one-time exercise while you're on board, but continue to monitor and look into them. Okay. Sorry, it's hard for me to hear you otherwise.
Yeah, sorry. While I'm fully agree with you that cloud is like more secure than the on-premises, but I was wondering if you have any personal experience around, if you think from the insider threat perspective. Yeah. So let's see if you have a privileged user in a cloud who can do anything. Is there anything that you guys are doing to mitigate the potential insider threat that can expose like huge risk to the entire platform?
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question, right? And privileged extra insider threat is something that I think is not just in the cloud, but is there as well. But what we are doing is like, obviously PAM is an important component of what we look into it. So again, back to zero trust principles, right? Least privilege for a limited point of time under monitoring. So even in the cloud, you're also able to monitor user sessions a lot better than what you actually do. So you can think about, I mean, I cannot share all the details, but think about how do you relate privileged user accesses, what happened to SOC use cases, and what you actually detect, because you can do that, right, to detect that part, right? And it's also important that you go through the risk modeling and understanding what is there. But it comes back to me, it comes back to basic identity and access management principles, which you probably need to even more focus on. If you give privileged user access, don't give it for all the time, give it for limited access, basically. Look at it from the way it is, and then think about when you develop your use cases for your security operations, basically what you actually detect. Think about the use cases and how you link these two together, because you can see identity moves and you can actually configure alerts, and you can use the AI basically to help you to identify which ones are real, which ones are not real, right? Filter through that noise. But insider threats is something that's important in IAM overall, right? And need to work through that, right? Okay.
Thank you.
I think I'm out of time, so yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kun Dennis Trawnitschek, Chief Technology Officer at SCB X. Once again, we strived for the best experience for all of you, so please help us scan the QR code to share your feedback so we can continuously improve our event. I'll also do a quick wrap up in Thai. สำหรับคุณเดนิสนะคะ CTO ของ SCB X ค่ะได้เล่าให้เราฟังนะคะในหัวข้อ Modernizing Cloud Security นะคะโดยคุณเดนิสค่ะมีความเชื่อนะคะว่าการที่เราใช้คลาวด์เนี่ยเราสามารถทำให้มันปลอดภัยได้นะคะถ้าเราใช้อย่างถูกวิธีค่ะโดยคุณเดนิสเริ่มแนะนำนะคะจากตอนแรกเลยคือ SCB X ค่ะว่าเป็นยานแม่ของกลุ่มเทคโนโลยีนะคะทางการเงินค่ะโดยมีบริษัทนะคะภายใต้กลุ่มในเครือกว่า10บริษัทนะคะทั้งในกลุ่มธนาคารการเงินดิจิทัลแล้วก็แพลตฟอร์มและ Climate ค่ะซึ่งในเรื่องของคลาวด์นะคะความปลอดภัยเนี่ยสามารถที่จะเกิดขึ้นได้ค่ะหากเราเข้าใจนะคะในเรื่องของความสำคัญต่างๆในการใช้นะคะข้อแรกนะคะที่คุณเดนิสเน้นย้ำค่ะจะเป็นเรื่องของ Share Responsibility นะคะว่าไม่ว่าจะเป็นจาก Cloud Service Provider นะคะแล้วก็เป็น Cloud User นั่นเองค่ะเราจะต้องเข้าใจนะคะแล้วก็รู้ว่าความรับผิดชอบของเราอยู่ตรงไหนค่ะไม่ใช่คิดว่าเมื่อเรานำเอาข้อมูลที่สำคัญของเราอยู่ที่ Cloud แล้วนะคะความรับผิดชอบทั้งหมดจะอยู่ที่ Cloud Service Provider เรื่องนั้นเป็นเรื่องที่ไม่จริงนะคะเพราะว่าผู้ใช้งานเองนะคะอย่างบริษัทอย่างเราก็จะมีความรับผิดชอบนั้นด้วยค่ะและข้อ2นะคะในเรื่องของ increasing visibility ค่ะคุณเดนิสค่ะได้เล่าให้ฟังถึงข้อดีของการใช้ cloud นะคะว่าสามารถที่จะช่วยให้เราเนี่ย monitor threats ต่างๆได้นะคะอย่างเป็นreal time เลยนะคะและยังสามารถช่วยในเรื่องของการวิเคราะห์threats ต่างๆที่อาจจะเกิดขึ้นและ insights ต่างๆด้วยนั่นเองค่ะนอกจากนี้นะคะการใช้ Cloud เนี่ยยังเป็นข้อดีที่จะทำให้เราสามารถเมื่อเรามี Cloud Native Framework นะคะจะทำให้เราสามารถ automate งานต่างๆได้นะคะทำให้งานเกิดมีความ scalable มากขึ้นนะคะและมีการป้องกันข้อมูลที่แข็งแกร่งมากขึ้นค่ะข้อสุดท้ายนะคะที่ทำไม SCB X ถึงมุ่งเน้นนะคะที่จะใช้ Cloud แล้วก็เพิ่มในเรื่องของ Security Transformation นะคะก็จะเป็นเรื่องของการที่เราสามารถที่จะอยู่ภายใต้การกำหนดควบคุมและกฎหมายต่างๆได้ดียิ่งขึ้นนั่นเองค่ะคุณเดนิสได้เล่าต่อนะคะว่า SCB X นะคะได้เริ่มใช้ Cloud และมีการ Modernize Cloud Security ของตัวเองแล้วนะคะโดยมีทั้งเรื่องของ Share Responsibility นะคะที่เราได้ให้ผู้บริการ Cloud นะคะมีโครงสร้างที่ secure นะคะหรือปลอดภัยค่ะโดยผู้ใช้นะคะคือ SCB X ก็จะต้องมีมาตรการการป้องกันข้อมูลต่างๆนะคะมีการใช้แอปพลิเคชันต่างๆที่มีความปลอดภัยนะคะและเกิดการเข้าถึงที่ปลอดภัยนั่นเองค่ะนอกจากนี้นะคะสิ่งที่ตามมาค่ะก็คือต้นทุนด้านความปลอดภัยต่างๆนะคะก็จะลดลงค่ะรวมถึงเพิ่มความคล่องตัวนะคะและเพิ่มการใช้เทคโนโลยีนั่นเองค่ะ วิธีการของ SCB X นะคะแบ่งเป็น 5 อย่างนะคะในการที่จะทำให้ Cloud เนี่ยเกิดความ secure ขึ้นค่ะเป็นเรื่องของ strategy นะคะ identity ค่ะ secure นะคะ monitor และ innovate ค่ะในเรื่องของ strategy นะคะการทำให้ Cloudการใช้ Cloud ในองค์กร Secure ได้นะคะจะต้องมีการคิดแบบเป็นระบบนะคะแล้วก็มีมาตรฐาน Security ที่ชัดเจนค่ะและรวมถึงเรื่องของ Identity นะคะว่าจะต้องมี Zero Trust Policy ค่ะและมีความปลอดภัยอย่างเช่นการใช้ Multi Layer Protection นะคะรวมถึงมีการตรวจตลอดเวลานะคะmonitor แล้วก็ตรวจได้มากขึ้นนะคะและสุดท้ายค่ะSCB X นะคะมีการใช้ AI Power Security นะคะเนื่องจาก SCB X เป็น AI First Company นะคะทำให้การใช้ AI เนี่ยเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของการป้องกันthreats นะคะและ Cyber Attack ต่างๆในองค์กรของ SCB X นั่นเองค่ะโดยคุณเดนิสได้ก่อนกล่าวจบนะคะได้เล่าให้ฟังค่ะว่า SCB X เป็น AI First Company นะคะซึ่งเขามีเป้าหมายค่ะที่จะ generate นะคะกำไร 75% ค่ะให้มาจาก AI นั่นเองค่ะ For our next session, we will take a short break and we will resume at about 11:30 a.m. And the topic will be on risk management and regulatory compliance with AI-powered cybersecurity. And this session will be delivered by Bitdefender. So see you here at 11:30. Thank you.